Good morning. Good morning. My name is Josh, mentioned as Mark, and I'm going to be sharing an unusual sort of a sermon with you today. We come here in church and we preach to Christians, and I want to speak today to atheists. Now, we probably don't have too many atheists in the crowd. We do have an atheist alert system that's supposed to ring if one walks in, and it did not ring today, but sometimes it doesn't work. So if you are an unbeliever in that sense, welcome. I want to preach for you today, not to put you down or denigrate you, but to point out some things. And others will be watching on Facebook Live or watching the video later, and so I want to welcome you, and we just want to talk today about the dilemmas that atheists face. And there are some real dilemmas. We all have dilemmas. We all have doubts. We Christians have some dilemmas that are quite perplexing that we wrestle with. But the atheist dilemmas are not just perplexing, they are, as I plan to show, really unresolvable. And that's something that anybody who's not a believer needs to face up to. It basically, what I want to show you is why, as strange as it sounds, I literally do not have enough faith to be an atheist. It just requires too much of a leap, too much of a jump. Now, the atheist's basic dilemma is that there are several inescapable conclusions to be drawn if atheism is true, yet it is impossible to actually live as those conclusions are true. So there's certain things you have to believe, but you can't live as though those things are true. By way of introduction too, atheism today is one of the fastest growing religions in the West. Now, a couple of things to say about that. Number one, what do you mean religion? The other one is West. Outside of America and Europe, Christianity is just booming. It's growing faster than ever before. Any place where you find poor people, oppressed people, struggling people, Christianity is thriving. In places where people are prosperous and comfortable in the world and doing well, atheism is increasing in numbers. As far as religion, many would object it's not a religion, and it certainly does not have rituals, it does not have a holy book, it does not have a formal structure, any of those things. But what it does have is a theology. It has doctrines, just like Christianity and other religions, about God, about man, about right and wrong, about all of the things that theology talks about. And those doctrines are dogmatic. If you've ever gotten in an argument with an atheist, you know what I mean. And they are faith-based. Now, I'll come back to faith-based in a second, but also when we talk about atheists, there are literal atheists. People who say, there is no God, and they'll fight you for it, verbally, hopefully. And then there are agnostics who say, I don't know if there's a God, which means you live like an atheist. Because if there is a God, but he hasn't made himself known, we don't know what he wants, we might as well just live like he doesn't exist. So I'm going to speak today both to literal and practical atheists and show how both of those are really untenable positions. When I said that it's faith-based, one of the basic tenets of atheism is that the only way you can know truth, the only way, is through what's called empiricism. Now, empiricism originally meant anything we know through our five senses. So the physical world, all those things we hear, see, touch, feel, etc. It's of course expanded to mean things we learn through instruments, telescopes, things like that. But it's all based ultimately on our five senses. And if it's not empirical, then if it can be empirically established, then it's true. If it cannot be empirically established, then it's just guessing. And of course, you can't empirically establish that there's a God. So it doesn't fall in the category of truth. Only things that are empirically known are true. Now, the huge problem with that, some of you may be already caught on, is that it's a self-defeating proposition. The statement, empiricism is the only way to know what is true, you can't know that empirically. You don't learn that through your five senses or through any instruments or through science. It's a faith-based dogma. the statement, empiricism is the only way to know what's true. And so, if that statement is true, it's not true. You know, it's one of those funny things. But not just funny. It's unprovable, and it's something that people believe by faith. It's a faith-based statement. It's like saying, you can go out and put on some sunglasses with red lenses, and if you do that and you look at the area, you say, there's no red rocks here. All I see is gray, because the red lenses take the red right out. And so if you look at everything through empiricism, which is what we can see here, touching, you're not going to see or realize or know anything which is non-physical. And so I don't know anything that's non-physical, therefore there isn't anything non-physical, because I ruled out the possibility of there being anything non-physical. Atheists, when they're really atheists, are what we also call naturalistic materialists. And what that means is that matter is all there is. And by matter, I mean all this stuff of physics, energy and quarks and string theory and dark matter and all of that stuff. But the physical universe is all that there is. There is no non-physical reality in the universe. Some people kind of mock that as being a form of nothing buttery, they call it. There's nothing but material. But the real question for us is that a realistic way of looking at the universe, or is it a reductionistic way that leaves out something important? And what are the implications of a soulless universe, an unenchanted universe? Why is there something rather than nothing? Philosophers say that is the greatest question in philosophy. And it is a question in philosophy, not science, because science can't speak to that. You ever thought about that? Why is there anything rather than nothing? And when you ask that question, first of all, we know if there was nothing, if there ever was nothing, absolutely nothing, there would still be nothing. Because if all you have is nothing, nothing can't do anything, and there wouldn't be anything. Nothing cannot turn into something. That's impossible. Utterly, totally impossible. So it leaves us only two alternatives. It's a binary question. Either matter, the physical universe, is eternal, absolutely eternal. It always has been. There never was it not being. Or, if it's not eternal, there is some sort of non-physical, powerful being who was able to make something out of nothing. What the Bible calls, what theologians call creation ex nihilo. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So there is either eternal matter or some eternal being who created matter. Those are our only two choices, the atheistic belief or the theistic belief. There are no other alternatives. Many years ago, some of you remember Carl Sagan, a science popularist, going on TV and wrote a book and did a TV series. The cosmos, meaning the universe, is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. That's the atheist answer to Genesis 1:1. Either matter is eternal, or somebody made everything out of nothing. Now, atheists say that matter is all that there is, or was, or ever shall be. There is no non-physical reality. There was, some 14 billion years ago, a Big Bang. Before that, everything was compressed in a black hole. There was a Big Bang. Everything got spread out throughout the universe, all the dust and rocks and particles, and some of it combined and formed into planets and chemicals and plants and amoebas and bugs and snakes and people, and here we are. We are the product of stuff blowing up and following unbreakable physical laws until it became us. We are part and parcel of what the Big Bang has done. And then eventually it will all collapse, and there will be another Big Bang, and there will be another universe for however many billion or trillion years, and it will collapse on and on eternally like that. So in other words, the universe is a random, purposeless, impersonal mechanism. That means there is no such thing as free will. There is no freedom to choose. We can only pretend, because we are all part of the machine. To have free will, there has to be some part of me that isn't physical. Something that can choose, not just something that's been determined. This means there's no reason to trust our own thoughts, because our thoughts have been pre-programmed by this random Big Bang. There is no objective, transcendent morality, no morality above me. Only the things that I choose to believe, because they're emotionally satisfying, are moral. Morality is simply an evolutionary byproduct. It's totally subjective. There is no purpose, meaning, or significance to our lives. We are really no different than shooting stars. You see a rock flying through the sky and it burns out. It's following immutable physical laws, and then it's done. You and I live our lives following immutable physical laws, and then we're done. And that's it. I don't want you to think I'm exaggerating or distorting what atheists believe. I could quote lots of them. Let me quote just one example. Alex Rosenberg is a philosophy professor at Duke. He wrote a book from an atheist perspective, The Atheist's Guide to Reality, Enjoying Life Without Illusions. And he had a question and answer section, kind of a catechism for atheists. This is what he wrote. Is there a God? No. What is the nature of reality? What physics says it is. What is the purpose of the universe? There is none. What is the meaning of life? There is none. Why am I here? Just dumb luck. Is there a soul? Is it immortal? Are you kidding? Is there free will? Not a chance. What happens when I die? Everything pretty much goes on as before, except us. What is the difference between right and wrong, good and bad? There is no moral difference between them. Why should I be moral? Because it makes you feel better than being immoral. Is abortion, euthanasia, suicide, paying taxes, foreign aid, or anything else you don't like forbidden, permissible, or sometimes obligatory? Answer, anything goes. And that's repeated over and over again in atheist literature. It's just the obvious conclusion of a purely naturalistic universe. We are no different from animals or even plants. Everything we do is instinct. It's our biological and chemical programming. There is no real such thing as choosing. We're like machines. We respond to stimuli according to our programming. You punch 3 plus 4 into your calculator, and 7 pops up. Well, the calculator didn't stop and think, well, let me think, how much is 3 and 4? No, it just did that. That's the way it was designed. And that's the way we make choices. That's the way we live. Another atheist, Alan Lightman, MIT professor, said our consciousness and our self-awareness create an illusion that we are made out of some special substance. We have some kind of special ego power, some meanness, some I-ness, some unique existence. But in fact, we are nothing but bones, tissues, gelatinous membranes, neurons, electrical impulses, and chemicals. And Christian Rebecca McLaren responded, this may seem refreshingly honest, but if science is all we have, our sense of self is just an illusion, and we have no moral agency, morality is no more than preference. Lightman writes, we are a bunch of atoms like trees and like donuts. And McLaren says, so, eat a donut, eat a child, what's the difference? Lightman, she says, is not a lone voice crying out in the wilderness for abandonment of the concept of self. New atheist Sam Harris argues in his book Free Will that free will is no more than a delusion, with the idea that we as conscious beings are deeply responsible for the character of our mental lives and subsequent behavior that is simply impossible to map onto reality. The Bible says we were created in the image of God, the imago Dei, and that's what makes us different from all other creatures. But if we have no free will, we have no possibility of reason, of rationality, which is kind of ironical because atheists love to talk about how reasonable and how rational they are. Is it reasonable to believe in God? Well, if you're an atheist, it's not even reasonable to believe in reason. Naturalism tells us that our minds evolved from non-rational, blind, mechanistic processes. It's pure determinism. Rationality if there is such a thing, is by definition non-deterministic. We look at something, we analyze it, we make a choice as to what makes sense. Everything you think, do, believe, choose, value, decide, care about is, they say, caused by physical mechanisms that create your thoughts. You think you control your own thoughts, it feels like you control your own thoughts, but it's just an illusion. One of them wrote famously, the brain produces thought the same way the liver produces bile. It's the same kind of process. Our thoughts are literally worth, I'm not allowed to say that word in church. Our thoughts are literally worth dumb, literally. When you get into the car, you can press the gas pedal, you can press the brake, if you've got manual, you can shift. The car doesn't think about what to do. It just responds the way it's been built. And we are no different in a purely naturalistic universe. Birds will migrate from someplace in the north to someplace in the south, and then back and back and back. They don't think about it, they don't plan it, they don't go on TripAdvisor, they just do it. It's instinct. And we operate the same way. Philosopher Paul Gould said, to say this in our way, if our mental lives are governed solely by immutable physical laws, then our thoughts, beliefs, and inferences are by definition non-rational. My thoughts are not guided by a mind or genuine mental causes, but by purely material causes. By removing all non-material causes from the equation, naturalism negates the existence of reason itself. My brain is just a computer made of meat, formed by non-rational processes, and nobody knows how many bugs are in our operating systems. There's no reason to trust our thoughts. Our brains did evolve to enable us to survive and reproduce like other animals. But once you get beyond the things that any animal can do, all other reasoning has no survival benefit, no evolutionary explanation, no reason to be trusted. All our other thoughts are just noise. The existence of a genuinely rational mind is not at all surprising in a theistic universe, created by a rational mind. It is very surprising, extremely surprising, in a naturalistic account of the universe. Well, also, if there's no free will, there's no such thing as morality. Nothing. Morality means we have to evaluate, decide, choose between right and wrong. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who spent much of his life in the Gulag in Russia, wrote, "It is considered awkward to seriously use such words as good and evil. But if we are deprived of these concepts, what will be left? We will decline to the status of animals." Well, animals are amoral. Why? Because they don't have a free will. Animals steal. They steal food from each other. They rape. They murder, sometimes for no reason other than viciousness. Yet we don't hold them responsible for that. We don't watch a nature documentary and see these things happen and say, oh, that's evil. We need to do something about that. If we watch, say, a wolf pack, we even are impressed by the alpha male, even though he got to be the alpha male by doing things that would be utterly despicable in a human being. Because we know they have no free will. They're just acting out by instinct. If there is no God, there is no higher authority than me. Remember what the serpent said to Adam and Eve in the garden? You shall be as gods. You shall decide what is moral and what isn't for yourself. Nobody else can tell you. It's a self-deification. Instead of morality being something above me that judges me, it's within me. And I can change it when I want to. Morality is whatever makes me feel good about myself. What a fine person I am. Look what I did today. Atheists don't believe in moral absolutes, but most of them do have strong moral convictions and are very moral people. But that creates a serious dilemma for us. Tim Keller quotes atheist Mari Ruti, a professor at the University of Toronto, who wrote, an atheist writing, "Although I believe that values are socially constructed rather than God-given, I do not believe that gender inequality is any more defensible than racial inequality, despite repeated efforts to pass it off as a culture-specific custom rather than an instance of injustice. So she says first what an atheist has to say, that all moral values are socially constructed by human beings, not grounded in God. But then she hears some say that therefore they don't have to listen to her call to gender equality because it's nothing but a Western culturally constructed custom. On the contrary, she retorts, it is not. Gender equality is a universal moral norm that must be honored by all cultures. In other words, your moral values are socially constructed, but mine are absolute and true for everyone. That's a dilemma. Why should non-Westerners accept our Western views of human rights? In Afghanistan and other places where women are degraded and treated horribly, why should they accept our values? We've all heard of ISIS, the radical Muslim organization. In 2014, they attacked a Kurdish-speaking village, and Nadia Murad, age 21, was taken to a slave market in Mosul and brought to a judge whose job involved condemning people to death for minor offenses. The judge raped Nadia every day, beat her when she displeased him. When she tried to escape, he let his guards gang rape her. You are my fourth slave, he told her. The other three are Muslims now. I did that for them. Yazidis are infidels. That's why we are doing this. It is to help you. That's his moral code. ISIS had a book from their research and fatwa department. A book on their moral code. Sharia law, questions and answers on taking slaves. It said, is it permissible to have intercourse with a female slave who has not reached puberty? Answer, it is permissible to have intercourse with a female slave who hasn't reached puberty if she is fit for intercourse. Is it permissible to sell a female captive? It is permissible to buy, sell, or gift female captives or slaves, for they are merely property. That is their moral code. Who are we in the West, if there is no God, to impose our moral values on them? What gives us the right to play God in their lives? Something wrong with that, isn't it? We all know it. If you're an atheist, you know it. There's something really wrong with it. Friedrich Nietzsche was the first philosopher to base his philosophy on atheism. He wrote right after Darwin. And he took Darwin's principle of survival of the fittest and made an ethic of it, that our ethics should be based on evolutionary improvement of the race, survival of the fittest. He hated Christianity because what do Christians do? We go to the weak, the suffering, the struggling, the dying, and we help them. These are people who should die out. How is the race going to be strong if these people survive and reproduce? But we Christians have compassion on them. We serve them, we help them. He hated that. His logic was impeccable. But of course, Nietzsche is not a popular philosopher today, not because there was anything irrational about his philosophy, but because his most famous disciple decided to put it in practice. Adolf Hitler believed that he was improving the human race by reading society of inferior beings, the Jews. He believed he was doing nothing immoral. If I'm convinced the Nazis are wrong and we are right, what is it that validates our values and invalidates theirs? Hitler wrote in 1941, or stated in a speech, "Today war is nothing but a struggle for the riches of nature. By virtue of an inherent law, these riches belong to him who conquers them. That's in accordance with the laws of nature. By means of the struggle, the elites are continually renewed. The law of selection justifies this struggle by allowing the survival of the fittest. Christianity is a rebellion against natural law, a protest against nature. Taken to its logical extreme, Christianity would mean the systematic cultivation of human failure." And he said, as a result, we must eliminate sick people who would bring down the human race. And shortly after, they proceeded to do exactly that in the concentration camps. if a premise leads you to a conclusion that you innately know is not true, then something is wrong with your premise. So if your premise is there is no God, and that leads you to the conclusion that there is nothing objectively wrong with torturing babies, there's something wrong with your premise. If you believe that torturing babies is wrong, not just seems wrong, not just feels wrong, but is wrong, then you believe in objective morality, transcendent morality above us, that judges all of us whether we believe that or not. Not in me, above me. A morality that's discovered, not chosen. A morality that everyone is answerable to and judged by. And if you pass moral judgment on racists, sexists, politicians, rapists, those who would kidnap and sell children to sexual perverts, if you pass moral judgment on them, then you are asserting that you believe that this transcendent morality is knowable and that everybody should know it and be answerable to it. Otherwise, who made you God? Who made you the judge? Who put you over all of mankind? Who gave you the right to tell other people to live by your moral code? Andrea Dilley was raised in a Christian family, and she grew up and saw a lot of injustice in the world, and it caused her to completely reject God and Jesus. Why wasn't God doing something about all this suffering and injustice? One evening she got into a philosophical discussion with another young man who also did not believe in God and also did not believe in an absolute moral law. And she got into an argument with him saying, if morality is subject, you cannot say Hitler was wrong. You cannot condemn evil. It then struck her she was arguing with him from a theistic perspective. And she later said, when people ask me what drove me out the doors of the church and then what brought me back, my answer to both questions is the same. I left the church in part because I was mad at God about human suffering and injustice. And I came back to God, to church, because of that same struggle. I realized I couldn't even talk about justice without standing inside of a theistic framework. In a naturalistic worldview, a parentless orphan in the slums of Nairobi can only be explained in terms of survival of the fittest. We're all just animals slumming it in a godless world, fighting for space and resources. The idea of justice doesn't really mean anything. To talk about justice, you have to talk about objective morality, and to talk about objective morality, you have to talk about God. In a theistic universe, we would expect to have a deep sense of moral obligation. In a naturalistic universe, we would not. Atheists cannot account for one of the most fundamental realities of human experience. Philosopher Immanuel Kant said, two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing reverence: the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. In Romans chapter 2, we read that God has written his law on our hearts. You can say the law doesn't exist. You can say the God who wrote it doesn't exist. But that law is there asserting itself to you every day of your life. Finally, and I could give a lot more irresolvable dilemmas, but finally, for purposes of time, for a naturalistic universe, there's no ultimate purpose or meaning. Big bangs come and go infinitely, always have, always will, nothing lasts, nothing ultimately matters. 80 trillion universes ago, Jazalika Mumu of the planet Earth was a carbon-based life form much like you and I. He strove for all of his 700 Earth years to live so as to leave behind a positive, lasting legacy. His sister lived only for pleasure and died at the tender age of 250. 80 trillion years ago. So what? 80 trillion years from now? 80 trillion universes from now? A lot more than 80 trillion years. That's us. And then it goes on and on and on. And it doesn't mean a thing. Just atoms doing what atoms do. None of us is any more significant than any other chunk of stuff flying through space. Not me, not you, not your spouse, not your mom, not your kids, not the people who we celebrate memorial. Some atheists respond that, well, we create our own meaning and purpose for living. But created meanings have no external reality. There's no there. If you were to define your meaning in life as to make a difference, the naturalistic philosophy says in the end, nothing makes a difference. After you've gone out of existence, it won't matter if you existed. It won't matter if you lived 3 years or 300 years. Nothing counts forever. Birth, life, death, that's all, folks. There are only two rational responses to meaninglessness: despair or distraction. Billy Graham asked Derek Bach, the president of Harvard, about 20 years ago, what is the number one struggle students at Harvard have to contend with? Living with emptiness. Well, we have so much depression nowadays. It's a pandemic. But isn't depression a rational response to a meaningless existence? You want to know an empirical fact? An empirical fact is that people who feel they have no meaning or purpose in life are far more prone to commit suicide. If you persuade someone that atheism is true, you could be setting them up for that rational response. Well, for some suicide, but for most people it's simply an endless series of distractions to take our minds off of our impending eternal nothingness. We have our bucket lists, our Netflix, our video games, our sexual conquests, our endless supply of restaurants and trips and travels and friends and games and just all the different things just to take our mind off of reality. And yet humans have been set apart from all other creatures by our ability to simply question the facts of our own existence. Atheists have to continually suppress their innate sense that there is a meaning and significance to be found, not invented. They have to suppress that. It keeps coming up and they have to keep suppressing it, but it's not easy to stop thinking, is it? That's a dilemma for atheists. God's Spirit keeps prodding us otherwise. A genuine meaning transcends us, and it also judges us. Judges our desires as right and wrong. Judges our actions as right or wrong. Am I fulfilling or am I thwarting the purpose of my Maker for my existence? Well, let me sum up. Atheists believe the universe as we know. Well, no, let me lost my train of thought there. The universe as we know it, scientists tell us, is inexplicable apart from the existence of something called dark matter. It makes up a majority of the universe. We can't see it, we can't measure it, we can't find it, but by gravitation and the effects of gravitation, we know it's there. We believe in dark matter, even though, as astrophysicist Ethan Siegel put it, we have yet to obtain a shred of verifiable evidence for it. Why do we believe in dark matter? Because without it, we cannot explain things we know are true. And that's been my whole argument today. Without God, we cannot explain so many things that all of us intuitively, innately know are true. Atheism totally fails to explain reality as we know it, especially our inner realities. If the universe evolved by chance out of inanimate stuff, there's no basis for meaning, rationality, free will, morality. The dilemma of atheism is it cannot explain things that even atheists inescapably know are true. Most atheists are deeply committed to causes they believe are moral with a capital M. Most try to live a life that's significant and meaningful. Most believe that people are responsible for their choices. Yet in all these things, they are deeply conflicted because of their commitment to a naturalistic materialism as the only belief to God. only alternative to believe in God. And they have to live with this constant dilemma. If the universe was created by an infinitely powerful, eternal, moral, personal, intentional being, all of these things that we innately and inescapably understand are true and real and can be easily accounted for. So why are there still atheists? Well, one of them, philosopher Thomas Nagel, said, "I want atheism to be true. I am made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. It isn't just that I don't believe in God and actually hope that I'm right. It's that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want to live in a universe like that. I don't want to be accountable." Romans 1 says that the knowledge of God is evident to all, but that unbelievers suppress the truth in unrighteousness. That's not an argument I like to use with atheists. I don't like to tell somebody when we're arguing, well, you're just suppressing the truth. And how do you answer that? They just say the same to you. But, in fact, we've seen that that's what's happening. These are truths we know. The obvious conclusion is God. The only way to escape it is to suppress that truth. And that's why the psalmist said, "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God." Jesus said, one of his mysterious statements, he had so many, "The kingdom of God is within you." It's there. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, "God has written eternity in our hearts." Deep down inside, we all know. We all know there's more. Sometimes we see great art, hear great music, go to the Grand Canyon, experience the birth of a child, and we just know there's something more. We feel something that goes beyond physical, empirical explanations. We intuitively know there's more to life than mere existence, pleasure, and wealth. Human beings were never meant to live like cattle, and a life that's solely focused on the temporal is never going to satisfy us. Atheism is ultimately unlivable. If you still treat atheism a credible option, yes, you are suppressing the truth. And any dogma that suppresses the truth about human dignity, purpose, morality, and rationality, and reduces human beings to cogs in a soulless machine, denigrates not only your own humanity, but that of everyone around you. I would like to conclude with a better way, but I don't have time to go into that in the detail it deserves, so we'll save most of that for July 11th, next time I preach. But, short version, we take science on faith. We really do. How much of what you know empirically did you discover for yourself, and how much of it was taught to you by somebody else? The moon is 250,000 approximately miles away. None of us in this room, I'll bet, ever measured it. We were told that, and we believed it. We trusted the authority. And that's true for most of what we believe. And faith is always only as good as the object we put it in. I take Jesus on faith when it comes to God, meaning and purpose, morality, life. Why would I trust Jesus on those things? There are many reasons we'll go into in detail later, but his whole life was prophesied hundreds of years before he was born. We have documents, we have Old Testament texts showing where he was born, when he would be born, how he would live, what line he would come from. So many details about him set down on paper. Some, of course, were in his control to fulfill. Others were out of his control. Some, it's like hard to say. I mean, that he would die for our sins, is that in your control or out of your control? Well, yeah, it's in your control, but not exactly something you want to jump into. His claims, unlike every other religious teacher, he didn't say, God has revealed some stuff to me. He said, I am God. I've been in heaven eternally with God. I can tell you what it's like. I've been there. I'm an authority. I've come down to earth to explain it to you. His life, he lived up to those claims. The people who knew him, the people who saw him. There was something so special about him that he is the most important person in human history. His resurrection, witnessed by so many, changing the lives of all his followers, changing the world that he lived in, becoming eventually the only universal religion in human history. And finally, he makes sense of my external and internal experiences in a way that nothing else can. I trust science for the mechanics of the physical world, and I trust Jesus for all the stuff that science simply cannot address, the really important stuff. Well, there's a story Jesus told about a prodigal son who was given so many good things, and he decided just to go off and ignore his father and live his own life. And then one day he came to his senses, and he thought, what's going to happen if I try to go back after the way I've acted? And he goes back, and his father greets him with open arms, waiting in the road, showers him with love, kills the fatted calf, throws a big party on his behalf. And that's there to tell all of us Jesus' purpose in coming. If you have wandered off, come back. You will be welcome. We call it amazing grace. You don't need to spend your life running away from everything that you deep down inside believe and know is true. The Bible starts with the words, in the beginning. The Gospel of John begins with the words, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being, which has come into being. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. He was in the world, the very world that was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and even those who were his own did not receive him. But to as many as did receive him, to them he gave the right to be children of God, even those who believe in his name. Thank you, Jesus, for your indescribable gift. May our eyes be open to see your truth, receive it, and find in the arms of our Father a loving home we all long for.